Well, I think we can start this session. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Privot, and on behalf of the GALA Programs Committee, welcome to our session together, Call Your Global Consultant, a Paradigm Shift. So let me start by reminding you that if you experience technical difficulties, you can use the chat box to ask for help, and the GALA staff will help you troubleshoot. Also, at the end of the discussion, we'll have some time to answer your more pressing questions. So don't forget to use the button in your control panel marked Q&A and also to vote for your favorite. With me today, we are joined by Melissa Biggs, who will be leading this panel discussion. Melissa is a partner at Local Solution Consultant. She has held management position in localization for over 25 years at technology firms across Silicon Valley. Her experience includes leading international strategic initiatives in enterprises and managing marketing and content localization, as well as localization project and vendor management in client organizations. She also enjoys volunteering for international and language-related projects at non-profits. All right, Melissa, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a wonderful panel today. Tim Murata, who is a partner at Locale Solutions and has many years in large enterprises and working with multiple size corporations on consulting. We have Michael Klinger, who many of you may know as the head of Anzu Global and now running language transactions partners. And finally, we have Manuela Furtado from Alpha CRC, who has many years as director of globalization at Alpha. So thank you all for joining us this morning. And all together, our panelists have probably over 100 years collectively of experience in both working within the language industry and with consulting. So you've got a pretty deep pool of talent here that we're going to talk with this morning. So this year's Gala theme, Gala Connected, Bounce Forward, maps so perfectly with the topic that we'd like to discuss with you this morning, which is looking at how you can use consulting in your businesses differently than you have in the past. As you know, over the past 2 years, there's been a real shift with both the pandemic as well as a shift in digital transformation in many firms that both in the language services sector as well as in the client space. So this has really turned a lot of ways that people do business on its head. And we'd like to look at a little bit this morning at how you can use this shift to potentially offer different sets of services to clients, and how this is a win-win situation. So we want to pull this all together so that you can see how this is a good investment in the future of everyone's business, and in making things far more streamlined than they may previously have been. So let's just start out the conversation by looking at some of the opportunities that may exist for you in using consultants and consultancies in different ways in your business. So I'm going to ask our panelists to just jump in and start to talk a little bit about what are some of the areas that you see for low hanging fruit for further customer and consulting services. Anyone want to start out there?
I'll give you a quick start and then we'll chip in. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be part of this panel. This is actually a very interesting topic, because indeed what we have seen is in the this digital revolution, I think, has opened opportunities for both sides, on the client side as well as on the consultant side. And for what we've seen is customers have now a much wider range of global audiences, and more diversified global audiences, and an interest and a drive to maximize the user experience. And for LSP and for consultants, I think it's opened up the door for a bigger plethora of services. And what we have seen a lot these days, the easier thing is from a partnership point of view. Guidance, clients are looking for guidance, are looking for support, and looking for expertise. And this open up a series of options from consultants in terms of how to, we've seen a lot of clients that are reaching out the market for the first time, and how to onboard, how to navigate all the various technology platform expertise, how to best create this program to maximize their impact. And on the other hand, a lot of targeted services. We're seeing a lot of need for control of the quality of the impact in on the usability. So a lot of language management, coordination, expertise, LQA and testing, AV. That's just to open up, the range of services that have become more relevant at the moment. Just an initial opening.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, what would you like to add to that?
Oh, I think it has. I think she hit it pretty well. I think right now it's all about understanding the possible, right? I think that's the biggest challenge for everybody. I think it truly is a brave new world. As we get a little further down into the conversation, I know we'll be able to dissect that a little bit further. But I think that's probably the biggest challenge for everybody right now, is simply not understanding and what the best way to address that is, because it's a whole new range of possibilities.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is there's so much technology out there and so many specializations that nobody knows. So the advantage is if you're a consultant or an LSP, you choose an area and become an expert. But right now there's so much advancement with AI and research and the tools and DeepL that there aren't really a lot of experts. So it's you want to, the low-lying fruit is jump in, pick something, and so you learn, and then you become the expert. So I think that's part of the exciting part of not knowing.
So just building on what you've said, Mike, what does the panel feel about the changes in directions that we'll have to take in the business, in our processes, in the requirements that we're going to be seeing, that are going to be coming from clients? Give us some pictures of what you see as some common trends.
I was thinking about this just before I always always practice in the last minute, but in the 15th or 16th century, there was a group of wise people. They knew, and whatever the question was, you go to them, right? And then you hit the 20th century, 21st century, forget it. I mean, there's no such thing. You go to Jeopardy, maybe they know something there, but so there's no group of wise men that can handle all the complexity that's happening. So you have speech to text, text to speech, you have AI and linguistic research, you have the complexity of tools that are out there right now. And now you have platforms where you have an avatar that speaks 40 languages. So what's out there, the gaps are really, where do you go to specialize? And what do you do to, so I think AI is one big one where a lot of companies are saying, can you help with implementation of this AI linguistic research for this company? So and Tim and Melissa, working for big companies, and Apple, there's a lot of investment that was put into that kind of work. So when you're an LSP, if you can give them shortcuts to how to go doing the research, you are head and shoulders above so much, and you're saving them so much money. So I think the gaps really are, there's so much technology out there, and even RSI, remote simultaneous interpreting platform. Who would have had that 5 years ago? So I think that all the technologies, how do you cover the knowledge base for all this technology that's exploding out there?
And Mike, I think something you touched on really effectively just now in your description is it's important to have that vision. So much has changed in the past 2 to 3 years, that some of it's been a forced change, some of it's been just a fast evolutionary change in the business and environment of clients, and really tapping into that vision, understanding how you can move from what you did do in the past to what you can do in the future is such a powerful way to improve your business and to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, Manuela, what would you like to add about some of the changes in directions and how you're seeing things from your perspective?
Absolutely. I think Mike has a very good point. And what we've seen, recently, especially in two things. You mentioned the pandemic, you mentioned the digital change, and right now this remote, engagement that we have. So this has opened many different things. What I can see is clients are coming, they're looking in two ways, to expand, let's put it this way. There is a level of sophistication that is opening up that we might not have had before. So the implementation of the sophistication of the technology, the acceleration of the technology has opened up different venues that we didn't see before. So beyond it has accelerated and amplified the localization process. So AI, TMS, and all of these have given us the chance to digest a lot of content, to become really expert there, to become fast, to become accurate. And now it has opened up the possibilities of where do we go next. So now clients, with the help of that, are now able to look at the beyond that point. So how do I become more effective? How does my product, my content, becomes more manageable, more local, more adaptive? And that has opened up the possibilities to to add to that basic service, to implement that with additional sophisticated programs. So I see clients are looking for support in making their product cohesive, in creating it consistent, in order to meet the best user experience. So that's where we have come in, when we can walk hand in hand. What I have seen is it's tapping back into the consultancy, the possibility to work hand in hand, to share with the client the discussion about what their strategies is going to be, and level up from each other in terms of what we can bring added value to what they are trying to do. So if you have a client that it's started with a localization process and now it's facing with, am I successful in all the territories? Where do I need to improve? And that's where the communication and the engagement with a consultant becomes interesting. Together we can analyze what is working, where do we bring added value. Or is market research, it's in target linguistic groups where we can massage this further.
Great. Tim, anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, I'd love to back up, summarize, and then add something new. Yeah, as you mentioned, I think the industry has undergone, in the last 2 years, maybe the biggest change I've seen in 20 years, right? Now, everyone always thinks, now I'm going to say because of AI and MT. Well, that's just part of it, right? That's just part of it. The bigger thing has to do with digital transformation, the need to address the challenges of digital transformation, and the technologies that support it. Everyone, as Manuela was just alluding to, everyone's responsibilities, if you're on the vendor side or on the buyer side, everyone's responsibilities become so much wider, right? But thank goodness for technology, that the ability to address these challenges is much more available. So I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna go a little bit into the consulting landscape, and I'm gonna start with the buyers. This might be a little controversial, but I really believe it. I think in general, buyers, and even some experienced buyers, are relying on old thinking to solve these new problems, right? They're just not there yet. They're not quite aligned with what's currently happening. And that's where I think a consultant, either on the vendor side or independents like us, can really, really help. The answers are out there for them, but I think they just need to interact with people who can express these possibilities more clearly to them.
Great. So let's just take a segue from what you just talked about, Tim, and talk a little bit about the skills that consultants and LSPs need to go forward and make this whole initiative successful. So Mike, could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was looking at, I recently had a request from a client for a consultant. And let's see, it starts off native fluency in English, and then either speaks Japanese, Korean, or Chinese fluently. Be able to create glossaries and evaluate translations, that's one side. But has deep knowledge of QA processes in the UI area, that's a requirement. Then has to manage projects, reconcile costs, manage people, track status reporting, let's see, have strong relationships with suppliers. I mean, it went on and on. Part of me just wanted to laugh. So it's like because the technology is increasing and because there's complexity there, people are not only need to have linguistic knowledge, but technical knowledge, and then obviously people experience. So the skill set is expanding. The salaries are not. And it's a challenge. I know Manuela can talk about that because vendors are asked to do a lot more, and not always the budget isn't required. So I don't disagree with Tim that buyers are not. They're asking for a lot more, and I think there's a real gap between what what buyers require on their side and what vendors require on their side. And there's a knowledge gap here. I think if you, Melissa and Tim, have worked on the software side, there's a whole level of complexity with technology that's not, that a day-to-day vendor does not deal with, in the sense that they're not in the middle of it. So I think there's another knowledge gap of a skill set that's challenging sometimes for vendors to understand what the software person is dealing with.
I think you have a very good, yeah, you're hitting, the nail there, because I think what's important in this moment of what I can see is to have an honest, open conversation. Like Tim is saying, we know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. We're all moving very fast, and as a service industry, we find both in innovation and in following where other people are doing at the same time. In terms of, everybody's coming up with new technology, with new things, and we're adapting. But then it's on our hands to figure out, what's the innovative program that is going to make that happen. So I think that for an LSP, for a vendor, is really to define who you are, what's your expertise, where are you investing, and you grow that with the market. So you're always changing. Who you were 10 years ago might not always be who you are today. So it is important to have that that conversation, that understanding, so that you get to understand deeper what the client is trying to do, and you are trying to put forward what makes sense. And I think it opens up to understanding, where do you tap within yourself, where do you line up with other, how do you compensate this round? There is not one single solution. As an LSP, you grow in the areas where where the client is going. So there is always a gap that you're trying to bridge. And the important point, I think, there is to line up the correct expectation, to understand really where the client is going, and to be able to say, there's always a triangle of things that you're trying to measure. You mentioned cost, you mentioned expertise, and then it's like the novelty, or the ultimate goal. And so to be able to have that conversation together and readjust and push forward and try something new, even at times, together, to build an actual program. I notice people are looking for overall comprehensive programs, how, either because they cannot, they don't have enough resources to do it, they have to look outside. And that's probably an important point to bring home, to open that discussion, to see, what can I do? Let me understand really where you're going, and then look around and see, do I have what it takes, or do I need to expand a little bit more? And you are always, learning. I mean, there are certain things that are inherent to our profile, how you've built yourself, and then there is the constant adding to the program, investing, bringing in new talents, trying to educate yourself to the next point.
For the audience, I would love to segue on what Manuela just said in a very specific way. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to make, based on this new reality of localization, I'm willing to make a prediction, and this is about vendors. Now, I understand when I say this, we're going to separate the kind of winners from losers over the next 3 years in the vendor category. That's not very interesting. But my prediction is that separation is going to be based on a single criterion, and it's this. Vendors who are specifically able to offer these new services that solve these new challenges for buyers are really going to succeed. Now, what might that look like? Maybe it's a much deeper, specific technology bench. Maybe vendors will actually have software engineers on their side. That could lead to them helping with integrations on the buyer side. And I'm not just talking about integrating your TMS with the vendor workflow. I mean, actually going in hand and working with the buyer's technology team, right? It could mean something as deep as that. But naturally, it would also mean helping to integrate MT at the proper time within the, within the confines of the buyer's current workflow, right? So I think those are the ones who are really going to succeed. And the ones who aren't going to grow, I'm not going to say they're going to go away, but people have talked about for 10 years, it's like, we're a great vendor because our linguistic quality is wonderful and our customer service is unparalleled. Those are important, right? But that's not going to get you into the future. And I think a lot of vendors, or some vendors, are still going to be stuck in that mindset, and they're simply not going to grow as much. And those are the vendors with whom we have these good conversations about what's it going to take to remain relevant to all of your buyers. And that's where I think these new services are going to be absolutely essential.
Well, that's great. You're on a limb. I like that. So my thought is this, that just we can be experts because there's no one here. It's just my daughter's dog is watching, so I have no one to respond to. But I think the value you guys bring, for example, you, Melissa, and Tim, are you know the other side. And so you can go into a client and you get their pain. So I just want to point out, though, there's a size differential. There's still going to be these $3 million, there's still going to be the $3 million companies that that are going to have good customer service and linguistic ability. So there are, I would not, for those guys, don't worry about it because they're just going to continue doing what they're doing. But I agree that unless you're a size of, you're an Alpha CRC or you're a Argos multilingual, when you get to 15, 20 million and you want to take care of your clients, the only option you have, I agree with, is become experts in a few areas. You can't be a generalist anymore. And this company in the UK, they sold their MT service to RWS. They were a break even at 1 million. They sold it for 20 million. But what that says is that the value of knowing this technology, the value of taking your company somewhere with shortcuts through technology and being able to guide them, that's invaluable. So the people who will get ahead, I agree, are the ones who get AI, look at the media localization. If you can work with those technologies, that's a huge, so I think if you, as a mid-sized to large vendor, you can have an expertise and you can save your clients money because you anticipate and can tell them how to go before they get there. Yeah, it's very valuable now.
And part of that skills expertise in working in that client environment is understanding what their other pain points might be, some of their organizational issues. It's very difficult as an outside consultant or vendor to get into what's really happening behind the curtain. And so much of their problem may be what is happening behind the curtain, and your skills and ability to be able to pull that out a bit helps you be more successful as a skill, and it's really critical.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to add one more thing. The buyers will get a lot smarter. So it's not that the need for linguistic quality or customer service is ever going away, right? Don't get me wrong at that. But the buyers are going to get smarter and they're going to realize, gosh, if I go with this vendor, I'm going to be able to solve all of these new problems, or maybe this vendor, or add one or two more, right? So I think that's really the point that I'm trying to make. And that's why these other vendors who aren't really exploring these possibilities, it's not that they're going away, but they simply won't grow as the other ones will.
And I think you mentioned the point of size that naturally we determine, some of the directions, because you have the possibility to maybe incorporate a larger set of service instead of one or two specifics. But I think the concept exactly is the same. It is, being able to engage together in understanding where's the ultimate goal, what is the strategies, what is you're trying to resolve, and then work together to push that in that direction. So one thing that I love, and it's very satisfactory, satisfactory in even within your own organization, is to pull in your own experts. Even for myself, as I discuss with the client what they're trying to do, and if it is a language quality issue, or if it is an entire program that they're trying to set up, or if it's an objective, is then to pull in from the organization, if you have it, and that's to have clarity and transparency of where you can add value, to bring that group in and together. And that's very rewarding, because you get to understand, and in talking with each other, I think the clients gets a little bit of a clearer, more touchy feeling. Okay, this is my objective, but this is the roads that I have to go through. And you listening to that, you're trying to figure out, okay, these are the areas that we're actually touching. This is a linguistic, this is a technology issue, this is a program or a process issue. And in that discussion, then you build up together something that works for that client. So you're trying to walk away from the this is the process that works for everybody, but it is this, from my end, having worked with this many different clients, I have this sense of flexibilities of what we could put together. You showing your own, and you own your product, you own your market. Even together, we'll try to figure out. There's certain things that we both know, and they're going to pop up, and others that we're going to have to figure out. And as you engage in all of this and you look back at who you are, that's where you try to create where the expertise goes. Am I going to open up more on the creative, on the marketing, or on the technology support? And I think, Tim, you mentioned, on the technology side, there are so many different TMS or platform or media, or all these type of things. Being able to understand them, to figure out where your gap is, or where you can add, that defines and helps a lot in that process.
And just a side note to what you said, if I may add, Manuela, I think it's really interesting that a lot of the value add that we can provide is this. They say, okay, we have a technology problem, we have a linguistic quality problem, we have this other kind of problem. I think the value add we have here is to say, what is the interconnectivity of these problems? Because what I found is that people are often looking at these as discrete challenges, when in fact there might be overlap, and our ability to help them see that overlap is really critical and very helpful.
Let's take a little segue now, and Manuela, could you tell us a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in the skill sets, in the types of issues that are coming up in the creative space with clients?
This is a very interesting topic, because I think in the creative area, or in the customer user area, there's like two directions, where we're seeing a support need, or an interest, or an opportunity, and a challenge. And one is with the entire market research and market support. You might work with a client that is seeing a certain performance in certain areas and might not in others. So maybe one locale is working very well, and another for some reason is not working. And it's the so then you work together. So what market analysis can I help you with? How can we nail down and massage what has the biggest impact? And you get close to the actual geofit and cultural aspect of the content that you are massaging. And so if we're looking at the creative side, this opens up for a lot of writing opportunities. We're moving away from traditional translation, and opens up, I think the biggest discussion you can have is how you map your content, and what part of that content is now open up for additional servicing instead of the translation or the transcreation of original content. This is the new area that is being opening up. We've had a lot of opportunities that way. Not just for the traditional marketing aspects, or sorry, I got a little bit my words kept on top of each other, but the for marketing experience for the a special campaign. So there is a whole set of creative writing that is available. And I think the challenge there is to build the right program for that and the right resources. I think that if you go down all the line to the individual resource, as we have evolved from translation and post editing, there's a lot of room now to to give space to creative writers. So that's been a very interesting and challenging aspect that we're going towards in terms of the actual program and in the actual creative aspects of the marketing experience.
Yeah. I mean, just
I think I've touched to a lot of things. It's a very broad field.
Yeah. I was just thinking, we worked with Google when they had their product that you talk to and it gives you answers. And we had 5 or 6 creative writers. This is for Indian languages. And you wouldn't think you need a creative writer to say, how do I find, but the responses really have to be, culturally adapted. So transcreation is a big piece now of translation would fall dead in so many media components now that you really transcreation, and there's companies that grew exponentially just doing transcreation. So I think that's again, adapting to the technology, creative writing and transcreation are more exciting components that if you can boast that you can help with that. I don't need a translator. I need someone to transcreate. That's
Absolutely.
That transcreation too is reflected not just in marketing material, but should you be asked to provide services for things like chat and in other areas of social media that are more immediate, that may need transcreation, possibly they need another solution to them. But
absolutely. And it's like blog writings, and it is all this aspect. And interestingly enough, also in the e-learning aspect, it's not just when we think of creative, it's immediate to think something like that, like blog, like social media, like targeted campaigns. That's where you might go writing completely anew. As I said, with the advantage of the digital experience is that it is allow customers to now isolate this higher impact content, where you can put a lot of effort. And when we look at the plethora of services, LSP, of individual, and to understand that the use and the employment of AI, of all technologies, is actually facilitating and opening up space to put this additional individualized talent in this part of the content that really needs a much more cultural adaptation. So you go through a marketing translation to a transcreation to a complete original content to write something that is meaningful for that audience. And that's very it's a great opportunity. It's very interesting to walk down that path.
Yeah, that culturalization is a real card to use as an LSP or as someone who is in the language and cultural field.
And I might add, even with other content, aside from the traditional marketing, but there is a lot of e-learning content that has become available right now, especially through this last couple of years. And there too, not everything is just for translation, because it is meant to educate, to teach, to train. There is a lot of space there to work together, to massage the content, to create it so that it is more geo-fit. That opens up the opportunity for a lot of talents to add that. I think we cannot move fast enough, in this direction to train and bring in these talent support.
If I may, I would love to take these specifics you're talking about up to a much, much higher level. And I think it's something Mike said earlier. And I know that Mike and Manuela will have opinions on this. This all illustrates there is no longer a one size fits all for any buyer, right? Everyone has different needs. I remember 10 years ago, you could call your friend at a different company, say, how are you handling this problem? They say, well, we did this. And you could apply it to your own company. It would pretty much work. Now things are much broader and much more individually complex, company by company, for that to work anymore. So it's interesting what you're talking about, the specifics of marketing and these needs. But then you take it up, it's like, yeah, everybody's different now. Didn't used to be that way. So
Tim, go a little further on that theme and talk to us a little bit about what you see in the current consulting landscape, and what are some of the unknowns, which I think you just touched on in that area, or pitfalls that if you're going to go into a consulting role with your customers, what do you think we should be looking at?
If we're talking about the buyer side, and I'll just stick to the buyer side, reviewing what I said earlier, is what I'm seeing is that buyers, and again, even experienced buyers, are kind of stuck in old thinking. So I think the first thing you can do, any consultant can help them with, is to show them these possibilities, right? That, no, you can't go online and find out how your company needs to do it, because, to repeat, it's no longer a one-size-fits-all world. So I think that's the really interesting thing. Again, speaking kind of generally about this, I would also add that it's not just a set of individual questions, right, or individual problems, because now the problems overlap within the buyer. And I hope that's clear. If that's not clear, let me know. But that's what I really see, is to see them how there's overlap. You're not talking about one specific thing. If we have time, let me give you a very quick example of how this has played out recently. Do we have, Melissa, how are we doing for time?
We have a minute or two.
Oh, okay. The story's too long for that, so I'm going to leave it there and see if my colleagues here would like to add anything to that.
So, Mike, do you have anything that you'd like to add about the especially when you talked about skills and how that's going to play into the consulting landscape?
Yeah, I think there's two ways of doing this, and I agree there's no one size fits all. So, oh, wow. If that's not me, that's my daughter's dog in the background, so I'm not a ventriloquist. I think there's the one where you go in as a consultant and you work with your client and say, well, you're doing this, this, and this, and you discover what was not seen, as you mentioned earlier, Melissa, that they don't tell you under the, they're not exposing something they may not even know. And you as a consultant go in there and you see, oh boy, you're missing this because your documentation is poorly written in English. And so now the cost of fixing that in 15 languages is extra. So as a consultant, you can do that where you go in and solve problems directly. Or you can do one other item, which is you can, it's like if you've never traveled to New York, the person who's done the subways before just says, hey, you take the AA and you go to the D, and that's how you get to 95th Street. But if you haven't traveled before, you're going to get lost. So a consultant who's done those pathways and knows where to go can advise the client. So I think there's two ways of going here. But again, it's getting back to specializing and having a knowledge base where you become valuable to the client exponentially because you can save them time and money. You know which tools to use. If it's, a TMS system, this is better than that. I wouldn't create it. I'd buy it off the shelf. All those things, if you're an expert and have the specialization, you're going to save them time and money, and that's very valuable.
Great. And Tim or Manuela, do you want to talk a little bit about the service provider expertise and how that is a good way to promote your services to a client in a consulting fashion? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, it becomes important, how can I say, the connection with the client and the language service provider is really to understand and know about each other. So is to, for you as a language service provider, to get a clear sense of who you are, what's your profile, where can you grow and where can you expand, and what is your value added, and be able to share that. I think Mike indicated there's two levels of consultancies, and it depends on who are you working with. You have buyers and clients that have an extraordinary expertise. They're very sophisticated, so they're looking for more targeted support. It could be streamlining their processes. It could be offshoring what they're doing because they realize that they need to focus on the more strategic, and they have a lot of tactical things. Or it could be, and there's where you get specific expertise. It is technical, it is all this. Or others that is more of a know-how. How do I get started? How do I navigate? And because you have that vision of many things, you mentioned, I'm, starting, I'm looking at all these different platforms. Does this make sense for me? Are you able to work with that if I choose that? What do you recommend? And so for you have these two levels, as a general approach to localization, where can I support the smaller, the new, or the larger client? And then with targeted specific services, what do I have? If AV has become a very potential area, do I have that? And if yes, how do I promote it? So as you discuss with client, have you thought about that? How are you handling that? Do I have something to offer, or I know somebody that I can work together and we can build that, or I will refer you to a consultant, to something. That's your knowledge of who you are, and that transparency, and that help you get there. And I notice clients wants to see that, wants to understand how you can help them. I want to have transparencies over your own program.
Great feedback. So to wrap around what everyone's been saying, I think what we're really focusing on as key takeaways here is it's really important for service providers to have the expertise in increased project complexity as you move forward in a consulting role, and also to define yourselves what your value add is for your customer, and talk about your specializations, not always about the breadth, but the specializations that you can provide uniquely to your client. And finally, to repeat what's been said in a couple of the different areas that we discussed, to make sure that you understand that there's no one size fits all solution, and that there are specific skill sets that you have that your customer does not, and that those are what you're going to focus on, and your specialization is important for in different ways for different customers. Anyone want to add to that as final wrap up? Okay, I just want to mention one other thing. We all know that in the past year and going forward, it seems like all language service providers are extremely busy, and the business is really booming in many sectors. But let's not forget the pivot that always should be in front of mind, that this will pass and we will need to invest in the future, and these kinds of consulting services are really kind of the spear to a larger role that you may have in the future. So with that, I want to open up the session to some questions. Mark,
Yeah,
did you
thank you.
have it?
Yeah, thank you for the panelists. It was a great discussion. Before we go to the questions, I would love for our visual artist to, yeah, perfect, show us his job, because I think it's really great, and I was looking forward to seeing it, because I could only see it really small on the side of the screen. So I love it. So yeah, for the participants, please send your questions right now. But I have a couple ones for you already. You talked a lot about different skills, and it's a question for everybody in the panel. What are the most challenging skill sets you have been asked to find in the globalization space? So who wants to start with that?
That's for you, Mike.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I mentioned the one where they wanted someone with bilingual or trilingual with QA experience, translation experience, management experience. Because of the complexity of technology and the growth in technology, I find the big challenge is having someone with people skills, localization skills, and technology skills. That's a big piece, but they seem to want those together. So if you come from the vendor side and it's a company, a software company, you may not have the chops to enter that. But I think AI is overused and it's everywhere. But I do think that finding people who understand it on a high level understanding, it's hard to find because it's still so new. So that's one area. I think also tools. Is it MemSource? Is it MemoQ? Is it PluNet? What's the best tool out there? And when you get clients asking you, if you don't know that on the vendor side, if you don't have a comfort level with the tools and which works for who, so there's an element with just, tools. Oh, there's so many tools out there now for interpreting platforms. Which tools do you use? Should we create our own product? So I think knowledge of technology tools, and then these, also media localization, all the dubbing, subtitling, the skill sets there involved, having someone who knows that world. So
Mike, if I could jump in here too, one of the things I've seen just over the last couple of years is especially in emerging companies, the new companies that are entering the playing field, they often have many, many, many tools that are not translation ready. They may be using 5 or 10 different content management tools, for example, and understanding what that background looks like is really critical for a consultant who obviously is going to focus on the language specific needs
absolutely,
for a company. But
absolutely.
really, if you have some basic understanding of what your client has, and you may be really surprised at the volume of tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I love the change that's happened in 3 years. If you're talking about hiring a localization project manager on the buyer side, 3 years ago in the job description, it says, must be familiar with CAT tools. But as Mike just said, now you're starting to see must be familiar with CAT tools, must be familiar with video localization tools, maybe even must be familiar with interpretation platforms or things like that. And that's in a very short period of time. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, for sure.
So on the panel, you have both an independent and a vendor-based localization consultant. So what, in your opinion, are the advantages and the disadvantages of using an independent or a vendor-based consultant?
I'd be happy to start with that, Manuela. I think that's for the two of us. And let me first sing the praises of the vendor-based consultant, right? Yeah, I would definitely divide this into 2 areas. If the vendor is currently working with the buyer, I think that's a huge advantage to go with the vendor-based consultant. And here's why. They already know what's going on behind the curtain, right? You have this intimate knowledge of who's who in the company. of what really needs to be done, of the maybe even the political, perils of doing certain things. So I think in that regard, if there's a relationship established, boy, I think a vendor consultant can do a really good job. The other side, I think, where independent consultants like us come in, is we always have the advantage of neutrality. So when we come in and do the work, we're never ever playing favorites. And if we were to ever do that, we'd be out of work, right? So we can bring, just very quickly, independence can always bring neutrality to the job. Whereas if there's already a relationship established, boy, I think the vendors can do a good job because they already know what's happening. Manuela, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I think, you said it all. I'm in total agreement with that, and I think that in the vendors relationship, I think the key aspect is there where the clients can really benefit is in what I said before, I said many times, is this partnership. This allows know about each other to deeper. And I think, one of the ultimate goal is for them to have, their program to be really cohesive with one another. So you can leverage off of what you're doing as you reach into other areas. Then again, you tap back into, do I cover all these areas and what best can I do? And then I can reach out somewhere else if I need to, but I think that's the very, very key differentiator. Do you need, what kind of consultancies do you need? What I have noticed is that consultancy has become a key element in every step of the way, and it's really how you approach. And you talked before about technology. Just solving that alone requires part of that. Melissa, you said it before, you might work with a client, they have a gazillion of different things for a million different reasons. And sometimes you have to just jump in and work within that environment, even though we both know that might not be the best, but you have to keep it going. And so you defer later, let's revisit this. Or other times you say, okay, we need to stop that because it doesn't really work with everything else that we are doing, and we are really complicating our lives, Right. So there's all this level of conversations that you can have, and when it comes to being agnostic, that's very important. If you're able to step outside and say, okay, here's how I view all these technology or services or things, this is what I can share in terms of information to help in that direction.
Yeah, oops, sorry. I'd add one quick thing, just as an aside. We're probably running out. Is that I agree with Tim. There's the consultant's neutrality, and the vendor knows the client. But the only challenge when the client has certain needs and specialization, and the vendor doesn't have that strength, but goes there. So it's kind of like you have a partner, and you married someone, but you love food and they can't cook. So the same problem here is if you're working with a vendor that doesn't have a strength in the area that you need to go, and they don't acknowledge that. So it's back, Manuel, being transparent.
Absolutely.
So I think
Absolutely.
that relationships with vendors
in both directions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sometimes the vendor can't really help you because they don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And again, this may not be an either or situation. Maybe it's a combination of having, as we mentioned earlier, more than one consultant. Yeah. And this, going back to the specialization. So there are places for each kind of scenario.
Absolutely.
All right. Perfect. We are reaching the end of this session. I was hoping that we would have more time for Tim's story, but I guess we can all go to the lounge after the sessions to meet there and hear it. So on that note, enjoy the rest of your day, and see you at other sessions.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.